All right, so the broadcast is live. Right, so Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all viewers. I'm Almas Basli. I'm the head of education south at ACCA Pakistan. And I welcome you all in the first round of panel discussion on future of education with a focus on higher and professional education. I am indeed honored to be joined by three distinguished panelists, which include Hasan Azhar, who is the Group CEO, HRSG. Hasan oversees corporate strategy and innovation initiatives at the firm. He has spent nearly 2 decades at New York based investment banks with roles in strategy, accounting, corporate finance, and operations for Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, and Merrill Lynch, as well as at IBM. He is an alumni of Baruch College and holds a bachelor's degree in finance and investments and a master's degree in accountancy. So thank you very much, Hassan, for joining us. Then we have second panelist, Reza Ali, who is the director of professional education at ACCA. Reza is responsible for the overall delivery of ACCA's educational support to education partners, students, and members globally. In his role, Reza is also responsible for the delivery of support for ACCA's members with their professional development needs. Prior to his current role, Reza worked across a number of different roles within ACCA, which includes finance, operations, markets, where he led the emerging markets Asia team and led development across key markets in ASEAN. Reza was also previously an auditor at PwC in London and later led the finance and operations division at a brokerage firm in Singapore. So, Reza, thank you for joining in. And then we have a third panelist with us, Dr. Sadia Nadeem. So, Dr. Sadia Nadeem, who is the Dean Fast School of Management, National University of Computer and Emerging Sciences. Dr. Sadia has been associated with FAST for 13 years. She began her professional career as an and an engineer in Pakistan and then moved to London, where she studied and worked for 13 years. Dr. Sadia holds an MBA and a PhD in management from Cass Business School, City University, London. Dr. Sadia has approximately 20 years of experience in the field of HR, during which she has published and presented her work to a variety of stakeholders. She is currently working on several national and international projects covering the areas of cross-cultural HRM, expatriate adjustment in Pakistan, high-performance work systems, trust and leadership. Her previous work also covers work-life balance, change management and discrimination, and disadvantage in the labor market. Dr. Nadeem is a chartered MCIPD UK, is also an executive council member of the National Business Education Accreditation Council in Pakistan. So thank you very much to all the panelists for joining us to share the great insight, perspectives, and your experience with the audience with us. So before we proceed with the panel discussion, I would like to make a couple of housekeeping announcements for our viewers that today's session is of total 90 minutes, out of which 30 minutes will be spent on discussions with the panelists, and last 30 minutes is your chance where we'll be happy and panelists will be happy to respond to your questions. So please, viewers, you can send your questions through the chat panel, as you can see with you. So, all right. Before I request panelists to share their perspectives, let me share briefly why ACCA is holding these panel discussions. Today is the day where we have begun the first round of panel discussion. And then tomorrow we'll have discussion with a focus on school systems. And third day on 14th, we'll be talking about the future of education with a more focus on the technological consideration. So viewers and panelists, as we know, as we know that COVID-19 has made a biggest impact on the world of education. And as per UNESCO, which estimates that over 1.5 billion students have been impacted as a result of school closures around the world. And in terms of percentage, if you think, it's over 91% of the world's student population. They are unable to continue their education. And if we talk about in Pakistan, so total 46 million learners have been impacted due to the closure of institutes in Pakistan. So we see that this impact of the closure of education institutions has been so profound enough, because that includes major implications on our learning, on our assessment, because the exams have been cancelled, and of course the credentials, where the graduates will be moving slowly to graduate and enter into the field of the workforce. Since no one can be so certain when this pandemic will end and when it will end, in what form it will end, therefore, we believe that this is a perfect time to talk about and rethink and redefine the future of education and how we can collectively reshape the education, not for today, not during the COVID-19, but of course beyond COVID-19, for future generations with excellence. So this session basically aims to capture the thoughts of our partners, of our panelists from ACCA, higher education, and then of course Hasan Azhar, who is representing the employer side of it. So if I may start, the first question from Dr. Sadia, as we know, we are in a situation of COVID-19. Since you are representing the university in the panel discussion, so how does the lockdown situation has impacted students in the higher education in Pakistan, and especially if you share the experience of FAST? Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, Almas. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Almas, first of all, I'd like to congratulate ACC on arranging this, not just this today's session, as well as a series of 3 sessions. I think it's an excellent initiative. And thank you so much for inviting me as a panel member. Regarding the situation that I think the best way to start saying is we are facing unprecedented challenges. We are facing the students. If I think of the students and how they are feeling, what you have to understand is that students were coming to university every day. They were attending lectures, but they were interacting with their friends. They were having discussion with their peers. They were having discussions with their teachers. It's not just the learning part. We cannot ignore the other side, which is the debates, the sports, the extracurricular activities which were there. So if you ask me what are the challenges which the students are facing, for that, I think I'm quite clear that we perhaps we can try to imagine what they're facing, but we cannot completely understand. If you have to think back to your own university days. You have to think back on what is it that you liked about university life, and then you can start to imagine how they are feeling. So if I talk about student challenges, I want to start with this idea that first we have to understand what student life is about and what kind of challenges they're facing. We can move beyond that. We can move beyond that to start talking about the challenges they're facing in learning online. For that, I think I would like to go about in 2 different ways. One thing is actually about the pedagogies, the pedagogical challenges, and the other thing is more about the tools. So briefly about the pedagogical challenges, they did not sign up for this. The students did not sign up for this kind of a learning experience. There are absolutely online courses which are there, and when a student enters an online course, they have a different mindset of what it's going to be to take that online course. The students are not accepting that or finding it difficult to accept that in online teaching and learning, a large part of the onus of teaching is actually, the onus of learning is actually on the student. Having said that, the faculty is also trying. If I talk about online teaching, I'll talk about my own experience for online teaching. I think I have been in university teaching for around 15 years now. I am very comfortable teaching in the classroom. I think I'm becoming more comfortable teaching in online courses as well. But when I'm teaching in the classroom, I have this very broad rule of thumb that I'll not speak for more than 50% of the time in a lecture with undergraduate class, and not 25% of the time if I'm teaching a PhD class. It has to be all about discussions. And we, the teachers, are also accepting, learning that online teaching is different. So the students, I've tried to involve the students. I've taken a lot of steps to involve the students so that they remain motivated. But motivating the students, engaging the students online, it has its own challenges. Mm, do you want me to cover the other parts of the technological issues as well at this point, or should
Yeah,
we go
yeah.
on to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it will be
So,
good in terms since HEC Pakistan has also devised policy guidelines on
mm,
online readiness for all universities in Pakistan. So,
okay.
to what extent you think that all universities in Pakistan are equipped with online education delivery processes for not only learning and of course maybe later part if you may want to touch upon the assessment side as well.
All right. So I was talking about online teaching, and I was talking more about the experience of online teaching and online learning. Uh, when we talk about the HEC and the HEC guidelines, we start talking about the online learning experience, but we also talk a lot about the connectivity issues. We also talk a lot about the tools which are used for delivering online lectures. Um, in my university, a variety of teachers, some people are using Zoom, some are using Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom is being used. If you look at the HEC guidelines, they provide similar guidelines that all these tools can be used. Using the tool is not an issue. Connectivity is, I think, the biggest issue there, because um, even in FAST has 5 campuses. The 5 campuses are based in Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, Chinor, Faisalabad, and Peshawar. So they're all big cities. Even in these big cities, some of the teachers also have a little bit of connectivity issues, but some of the students and many of the students who are remote students, they have connectivity issues. So I can never start a lecture with this confidence that every student is going to be present there uh, present there in the classroom and then will be able to complete the lecture. As per HEC guidelines, as per our own discussions at past as well, we are taking a large number of steps to actually overcome those issues. For
All right.
example, all the online lectures which are there, they are recorded as well. Even if I'm delivering a lecture, I would record the lecture, I would upload it somewhere. We have a learning management system. We have used the learning management system since 2010. So we always had the outlines uploaded, the slides uploaded, any assignments were submitted there. So all these are a part of HEC's readiness to go online. At FAST, we were fortunate that our learning management system has existed since 2010. But occasionally using that the students occasionally accessing the LMS versus what my team was telling me that if the average visits were in a certain duration, 500 in the normal days, they are now 3,500 visits in these days because everybody is doing everything online for the LMS. So we're talking about how universities can prepare, and the HEC has also provided guidelines about faculty readiness. As I
Yeah.
was saying, we're all trying to learn how we can deliver better lectures online. Student readiness particularly is about, they talk more about connectivity issues, but I also talk about the change in contract which they have, because the onus of learning is so much on the student now, and how to keep the students motivated, or how can they keep themselves motivated as well. HEC has also talked about things such as library. Of course, library and online resources, they're a very important source. Uh, at FAST, we've had a digital library. So it was accessible to from home, mostly to faculty, MS, PhD students. I think there was limited access for undergrad, but we have upgraded that as well. Then there's the labs part, which the HEC talks about, and we also talk about it. Less so in management sciences, more so in some other disciplines like engineering. Although the Fast School of Management program is quite unique, that we have 9 labs in our undergraduate programs, whether it's BS Accounting and Finance or BBA, we offer labs so that to make sure that our students are very ready to use on any softwares, etc. But those labs are still somewhat manageable when students are learning from home. Then there are other labs which are the hard core engineering labs. There are certain labs which we have not been able to complete, engineering labs. So HEC is also providing guidelines about faculty, students, labs, the university's connectivity issues, but then to ensure that student connectivity issues. But that's not something the universities can handle. That is something which needs to be handled at a much higher level, because we're talking about students who are joining us from all corners of Pakistan,
Right.
from remote areas of Azhar, Jammu Kashmir, to areas which are beyond Larkana in the areas of Sindh. So we have to actually make sure that every student can access the online material, online or offline, whether it's offline, whether it is online lectures. And uh, I think a large number of steps still need to be taken if this is to continue.
Right.
We'll need to, online learning is to continue. All of us will have to take several more steps to improve the quality.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, so that's great. That's great. I think I would like to come back on the level of coalition, the partnership where this connectivity issue can be tackled at the capital level. I would like to request Reza to share how the professional qualifications like ACCA has been facing the challenges, because it's again is spread in more than 100 countries. So how these challenges are being tackled, and what has been the response in terms of online delivery of education? Yes, Reza.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Almas. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. And I hope everybody is well. Um, a great question. And thank you, Dr. Sadia, for sharing some of your thoughts. And I think, I agree with the comments that you made in terms of, moving online, but also all of the different challenges that come along with that, including the pedagogy, the tools, and so on and so forth. Now, from an ACCA perspective, as you know, we do have just over 500,000 students studying ACCA across about 170 different countries, and we do see different challenges coming about as a result of this. Now, in one sense, we had a lot of our students in China who were impacted first, and I think they were the students who were impacted first before the rest of the world when they were going through the whole of the COVID challenges from January onwards. And a lot of the lessons learned from our China experience helped us prepare how we help our other students, across other countries. I think first and foremost, from an ACA perspective, we do need to accept and acknowledge that there is a very human problem at the heart of all of this. We've got our students who are impacted. There are students who may be working adults, and they may have issues with employability and jobs. We have students who are now unable to go to school, and I think going to classrooms, going to colleges, or going to universities, it is not just about going there to learn. It's about the wider social aspect that this brings along as well. And I think we know from an ACA perspective, it was always crucial that we were demonstrating the level of empathy to our students, and also indeed our learning providers, our university partners who are also teaching ACCA, and make sure that we they know that we are there to support them through this journey. So as you rightly point out, Almas, the shift has been to online. So it was quite interesting. So edX, which is a leading MOOC provider, they were saying just in a call last week that the world went from 3% of the world students learning online to basically close to 100% of students now learning online. So close to 1.2 billion odd students are now studying online, and that brings about different challenges. So from an ACCA perspective, we're saying, right, what does this mean for students? So they need to adapt. How do they move online? And going online and just studying online isn't just a case of one day you go to a classroom, you've got a tutor or a teacher or a lecturer in front of you, and the next day you just have the lecturer coming on onto you through a Skype call or a Teams call or a Zoom call, whatever. It doesn't work. The pedagogy needs to be adapted, and this is where I think the work that we were doing with our tutors, with our lecturers, with our education institutions have been crucial, because we needed to say, well, the pedagogy has to change. The choice of tools also need to reflect what the pedagogy is going to be. There's no way you can get a student set behind a monitor or an iPad or a phone and basically watching their tutor speak to them for 6 to 7 hours. It just doesn't work. There's no way we can keep the students engaged through such long periods of learning online, which is why tutors had to change the way they structure their classes, shorter videos, and in fact, I think best practices suggest, if a video is longer than about 8 minutes, students tend to lose focus and attention. So how do you create a series of short videos and keep students engaged? But the onus also turns to students, as Dr. Sadia mentioned, for their own preparation. So we can't just depend on the tutors to teach you all the way through. Students need to take the content and consume the content in their own way. And essentially, talk about flipped classroom. And people have been talking about flipped classrooms where students basically don't just go to the classroom, sit and just listen to a tutor. They need to go away, reflect, do the work, come back, and use the online session for discussions and for collaboration. And I think that changes the nature of the student's relationship with the tutors and with others as well. So that's something that we've been trying to do and trying to support. Now, we've also been providing students with access to a lot more digital content that they can consume. We've also been supporting our tutors and our lecturers with more educational support through online digital support, which they can then use in their online classrooms. But we've also been signposting them to, organizations. So, Dr. Sadia mentioned at a national level in Pakistan, some of the efforts being made by the government to promote different tools. At a global level, you've got the likes of UNESCO, who also got a whole series of tools, and guidance on, what resources are available for tutors to teach, what resources are available for students to learn better online as well. So I think these are some of the things that we've been working on. Now, the point on accessibility is a real one. We sometimes, it's easy to assume that every student has access to high quality broadband or high quality internet, and therefore everyone will have stable access to videos and to the internet bandwidth. But that's not the case, and it's a problem in the UK, and right now it's a problem in the US, where it's interesting. 15% of school-going children don't have access to proper broadband internet, and 1 in 5 teenagers, in a Pew Research survey in the US, said they were unable to complete the assignments because they didn't have the proper bandwidth to actually support, to support them in completing the assignments. So it is a real problem. I think we've seen some initiatives take place in a few different places. I think there's more free Wi-Fi connectivity being offered through Wi-Fi devices by different states in the US and also in the UK. They're trying to make access to the internet a bit more accessible for individuals. In places like Singapore, for instance, we see that the government has extended its national Wi-Fi program so that all students are not going to be disadvantaged, in terms of how they learn, and it's become quite central to how people learn and how people work and indeed even live. Especially through these times. So there's an element of how do we support students. There's an element of how do we support our tutors and our lecturers, because I think the more tools we can give them to help them teach students, the better the process will be. But we also are encouraging more collaborations across institutions. So it's interesting. We see now, universities across different parts of the world sharing content. So not everybody can create all the content that is required. We see certain universities saying, well, actually, I've got a great piece of online course around robotics and data and machine learning. You've got some great content around cybersecurity. Can we exchange content and recreate a larger package that helps students? So I think that collaboration is going to be important. And especially these times, I think education is a real source, the real force for good. Education, the real source of strength. And I think the more institutions across the world are able to come together, share content, the more students globally will have a better outcome. So there's that piece around, supporting tutors and supporting lecturers. And then at an organizational level, it's what can we do to support organizations. So a lot of organizations that have been pure face-to-face organizations suddenly making the transition to an online world, it is a bit of a step. So they need more guidance around, well, what are the best practices? How do you teach best online? How do you structure your classes online, and so on and so forth? So it's taking it from a student level, a tutor level, institution level. And I think that's the approach we've been taking at ACCA from a professional body perspective, and working with as many university partners and education partners as we can to create that coalition that ultimately gives the benefits that I think our students deserve. Thanks, Almas.
Right. Thank you very much. And I think that's the main one of the pointers you have talked on, the collaboration, whether it's amongst the educational alliances, whether it's between the professional associations and universities, and of course the collaboration or coalition at the level of government with other parties. We can look into resolving these issues. Now, I would like to request Hasan for your views that as an employer who is is giving business solutions globally to different organizations. And you manage the human capital and also guide other businesses to manage human capital. So how do you see the entire situation where you need to ensure for yourself and for other organizations which you guide that do you see any issues if the series of a number of people coming out from the online education system, let's say from now till 10 years in future, so do you see any quality issue in the human resource, or do you see that has as a knock-on effect for the employers? So over to you, Hasan.
Great, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Almas, I think it's important to note that it's a bit premature to really be able to comment on what employers would perceive of students coming out of online learning systems. Online learning has been around for some time, but as one of my peers on the panel mentioned, it went from 3% to nearly 100%, pretty much overnight. I think in many parts of the world, school systems have been shut down almost entirely, and employers are probably just getting started to understand what kind of implications this new world order, if you will have on their own ecosystem. So to give you some perspective, many employers are now in Pakistan in particular, as I engage with them, they're contemplating downsizing their facilities. They believe that a lot of their workers can actually work remotely, which they never really tried to the extent that now they have had to. And as a result of that, they're scaling down their facilities, not only to cut costs, but because they realize that they can get the same amount of productivity or almost as much productivity out of their people without having them come into the office on a regular basis. I think that will then have a knock-on effect on academia when academia steps up and provides a solution, if not today, then over the next few months or years, as the solutions evolve and get better over time. It will become almost a natural extension of academia for employers to then accept people coming into the workplace, having learned from these online solutions. Like I said, many people were not used to working remotely prior to this pandemic. We had the capability, we just never thought it was necessary or possible on a regular basis. Now we were kind of forced to, and we realized that a lot of the work that we did in our offices, maybe certainly a significant that can be done remotely, if not in all roles, at least in certain roles. And so I think in the longer term, employers are going to be far more welcoming and receptive towards people coming out of online learning systems. I don't think they'll have much of a choice because this is the new world that we live in. So if they're looking for talent, they're going to be looking for people who have had if not a purely online experience, but at least a hybrid online experience. And so this is the new world order, and I think in the longer term, at least, employers will be far more welcoming.
That's great, Hasan. Thank you for sharing the great insight. And I agree with you that this is the new world order. And especially keeping in mind where we know that this is not the same starting point for everybody in this world. It's not the same starting point for all students who are going to the state-owned universities and who are going to the private universities, and perhaps private universities can afford better technology, whereas the government institutions may not even have started adopting the technology. Since it's not the same starting point for everybody, and this is the new world order, we have to do it, right? So in terms of the opportunities, the online learning brings in, And of course, I want the panelists to comment on that in terms of the opportunity and also the assessment side, because exams have been cancelled. And I can see governments, especially in Pakistan, the provincial government, the federal government, and then they are brainstorming, they are discussing what could be the way forward in terms of ensuring that the exams are conducted, not compromising the health of the public, the students. So, is there any way forward? I mean, how we ensure and collaborate in this area? So, perhaps, Reza, you want to comment, and then I would like Dr. Sadia to comment after Reza. Over to you.
Great, thanks for that, Almas. And Hassan, completely agree. It's going to be a very new world in terms of what employers are going to be looking for, and recognizing that online has a place to play, and the place, and the way the new normal looks like post all of this pandemic, it's going to be quite different. Suddenly, organizations have shown actually you can have close to 100% of your organization working from home and still deliver on all of the outcomes that you want to deliver as an organization. Whereas in the past, some of the more older fashioned individuals, and I include myself in that category, you're thinking, well, how can you be working from home and deliver outputs and outcomes? But actually, we have shown that it can work, and it does continue to work. And I think from an online education perspective, I'll come to the question on assessment methods as well in a short while, almost. In terms of online training, I think whilst we impart knowledge in online education and training to individuals on the technical content, I think there is also a really great opportunity for us to be imparting values, life and professional skills to students. So from everything around resilience to adaptability, from collaboration to emotional intelligence, from creativity to passion, I think there is an opportunity here for us to be able to impart those skills and those values to students, which in time will create a much more holistic, much more rounded individual, rather than just someone who is just good on the technical side of things, but not necessarily so on the professional side of things. So there is an opportunity now, I think, through online learning for us to help students go beyond just rote learning and memorizing, and actually help them make a better sense of the world that we are living in now, and what it takes to be better friends, better neighbors, better colleagues, better professionals, and to really be able to act in the public interest. So there are great opportunities, and I think we should make use of these opportunities to train students so that they are ready, to be successful in the workplace. And I think the point about employability is going to be crucial. The labor market has become hugely volatile. We know that the unemployment rate in the US has gone up to close to 14%. Last weekend, they've got 26 million people who've been unemployed as a result of the pandemic in the US alone. Close to about 235 million people who are again, in a situation where they've lost jobs, or in some cases they've been furloughed, and therefore they are not able to go out and find work. And this is a problem. And what we are seeing is, we are seeing individuals actually now saying, well, how do I reskill myself? How do I upskill myself? And how do I build the capabilities I need in order to get the job that is going to be available out in the marketplace? And the type of skill sets that are required are also going to be changing. So I think the more we are able to then guide learners as well, and this will be adult learners, and help them upskill themselves, I think the better they will be, and better place in terms of getting jobs, going into the future. So I think that's something that we need to look at. How do we support employability? How do we support lifelong learning as well? Because I think that those are going to be the crucial issues. Now, on the point of assessment, we do see a huge disruption, and we see this at national school exam board level. We've seen that also in terms of professional bodies like ACCA and our own exams. So just to give some context, ACCA runs exams 4 times a year. Now, exams for us at the foundational level tend to be on-demand computer-based exams. We've got computer-based exams that need to be set at invigilated centers for our applied skills level, and then at the strategic professional level, in some regions and countries, we've introduced computer-based exams, but again, they have to be set at physical centers. Now, in China, for instance, we had to cancel exams in March because it was at the height of the pandemic for China, and we've had to cancel it because there was no way we were going to be able to have tens of thousands of students set in exam venues across the country with all of the social distancing measures that were needed. In June, we had to cancel exams across Europe, across the UK, across Northern America, and also across most parts of Africa, and indeed, including in Pakistan as well. But we are now looking at, well, how do we then support these students as they go for the September exam sessions, because we've had to cancel exam sessions. But we've also come to realization, well, in the new world, we could always have, systemic risks like the pandemic being forced upon us. So what is the solution? The solution can't just be, well, we won't run any more exams, because ultimately then students can't progress. They can't go to the next stages of their careers, of their education, and go out there and find jobs. So we've been looking at, well, how do we move our traditional exams into an online world where students are going to be able to sit for the exams at home. And I see, even in the Facebook questions, there have been a few questions. What's ACCA's position on remote proctoring? I am pleased to say that ACCA is now going to be introducing a level of flexibility for our students, and we've got 500,000 students who sit close to 1 million exams every year, to help them take their exams at home, or in certain countries where they can sit for exams in normal conditions. They can go sit exams at the venues. Where they cannot, they can then therefore sit the exams at home. And we've introduced this post a lot of conversations and discussions with regulators, because the biggest questions always are going to be, how are these exams going to be robust? How are they going to be secure? How do we ensure that the security of the exam situation is going to be controlled and maintained? How do you remotely invigilate these students as they are sitting for exams through a home-based system? So under remote invigilation, essentially exams are taken online, and they are supervised remotely by a live invigilator who's set, back home, and they are virtually observing you and seeing how you're sitting for the exams. And there is a very thorough system of checks and balances involving artificial intelligence, involving biometrics, involving recording. So the rigor, the security, and the integrity is going to be paramount. So we are going to be introducing, these remote proctored exams and remote invigilated exams in June for our current on-demand exams at the foundational level. So that will happen in June. And for the other exams at the applied skills, the intermediate level, as some of you will call it, these exams we will have remote proctored exams, remote invigilated exams in September. So that is coming down the pipeline. And what this means is that no student is going to be disadvantaged. Even if the pandemic situation continues, and inshallah, we hope it will not. But if it does continue, there will still be opportunities for students to sit for exams, because that sense of journey and progression is going to be crucial. So we will be doing it. We will be introducing it, and we have been working very closely with our education partners, with our regulators, with also various agencies and our suppliers. We are in a very good position. We will have the exams, the first ones in June, and then for the applied skills in September. And hopefully that helps answer some of the questions that students have been asking in the live comment section on Facebook as well. Thank you.
It has. Thank you, Reza. And I think this is an opportunity to hear what Dr. Sadia feels about it, because I'm sure lots of universities in Pakistan and vice chancellors, all faculty members, they are also brainstorming quite religiously on this aspect, because of course universities, they also want to move forward, and they also want to ensure that students do sit the exam, and as Reza mentioned, they want to progress into their career. So what are your thoughts around the assessment possibility at the end of the higher education institutes, Dr. Sadia?
Thank you, Almas. Before I move on to the assessment part, there's a very interesting part which Reza was covering, which was about opportunities. And I think when he spoke the first time, he also touched upon opportunities, and this time as well. I want to say something about that, and then I'll move on to assessment as well. Because I think that while I have highlighted many of the challenges which are there, but I think this remote learning opens up a lot of opportunities. And we need to look at it in a very positive manner as well. I am not talking about the lockdown and us being all stuck at home and doing this, but how we've all become very, if I talk about myself, I talk about my faculty, I talk about my friends who are teaching in universities in the UK, US, Malaysia, Australia. I have friends all over the world who are teaching in different universities, and we're all talking about how comfortable we have become with the online teaching. We know there's a long way to go to improve our skills, but we're becoming more and more comfortable with it, which actually means that we can have a lot more remote lectures as well. I have always tried to, particularly in my PhD classes, include foreign speakers who deliver lectures in the area of specialization. But I think why not at undergraduate level as well, at least in some courses, not just international speakers, speakers from across different universities, because whenever I'm thinking of inviting a guest speaker for my students, I'm usually thinking of who's there in Islamabad, Pindi area, who can come and deliver this lecture, whereas there could be somebody who is ideal for what I want the lecture to be delivered on and is based in Karachi or Lahore. And I've usually not used this option of remote lectures from within the country. It's also about what Reza touched upon, about using courses such as which are available in Coursera, etc. I don't have to use the full course, but I can blend parts of that course in my teaching and create a course which is more interesting as well. A course which is perhaps designed by somebody who's an expert, and not just talking about myself, I'm talking about faculty members in general, that there are so many courses available and we can all sometimes played with it a little bit, but not really used it to the full extent. Also, somebody was saying that is it going to create a disadvantage for some people? I think it can create an advantage for people who were in the past at a disadvantage, because if we start talking about more online lectures, not just Coursera type, but Pakistani universities is also recording more of these lectures, then people from different universities around Pakistan can have access to these, which are in Urdu as well, because we all have to accept that most Pakistani students learn better when the lecture is delivered in Urdu, or a large part of it is delivered in Urdu. For us at FAST, we have discussed this in various meetings that we have 5 campuses, and usually we have never offered a shared course so far. A shared course means that I'm teaching a course if I'm an expert on qualitative research and I'm delivering a PhD course of 16 weeks on this. Nobody from the other campuses has joined that lecture, which they could have joined, but we're now exploring that option. So there are so many opportunities which are being created. What I also want to add is, again, something which Reza mentioned, and I'd like to highlight that I was mentioning about how the onus of learning is more on the students in this online teaching learning process. If we can change the mindset of the students and make them understand that we've all tried that in the past as well, that is flipped classrooms and giving them assignments and giving them work in which they're exploring, learning at their own pace. But if we can actually break a certain barrier, which is in a large majority of the students' mindset, that it's something a teacher delivers and you learn. If we can turn them into lifelong learners, that is a major shift, which would not only improve sort of online learning process, but also make them into those online learners where they can prosper, grow throughout their sort of life. So I think this time period can also help us perhaps guide more and more students towards becoming online learners. I feel quite positively about the opportunities this creates, so I wanted to say something about that. And now coming to your question of assessment.
Sure.
About assessment, I am somebody who believes that assessment can be done online. I was talking about the learning management system, which we've had at FAST since 2010. And in 2012 to 17, we carried out a lot of MCQs online, which was students were sitting in the labs, and they carried out, the MCQs were taken online. We had some short questions also, which were completed online and submitted to the LMS. Quiz assignments are many times submitted through LMS. So that can be done, but can it be done in the current situation? I have a question mark there. Am I somebody who believes in open book exams and giving assignments on which students can write? Absolutely, yes. Timed assignments in which the student submits, and that can be an assessment, or open book exams, which are done in more of a examination hall. I like for my MS PhD students to certain degree for electives undergraduate level as well. Open book exams, I think they test higher level abilities in students. But the question becomes, if we're not talking about any kind of invigilations here, if we're not talking about any remote centers or any labs, then I come to what Reza was saying about proctored exams, remote proctored exams. We have actually discussed that. We at FAST have discussed that as well. I've discussed it with colleagues at other universities as well. At this point, we feel that there are so many connectivity issues that we are not going for proctored exams at this point. A friend was telling me that they had an audio proctored exam, which was something I said, okay, fine. There are students who are in my class and then they get disconnected in between and then they come back again. And this we're talking about audio links, because most of the, until unless the students are giving a presentation online, they're all on audios. To have 40, 50 students or even 30 students with their video links on is something which is quite a challenge. We don't have those bandwidths. The students don't have those bandwidths. So that can be an issue. I'm sure you've thought of all the ways on how you're going to manage it, but we in many universities have thought of it and found that connectivity is the big issue. There's also a question of, if I'm sitting here about remote proctoring of exams, that if I'm sitting here and you can only see a certain part of me, and if I'm writing, you cannot have a full view of what access do I have to the material on my desk or around me. There are some methods in which there's a second mobile phone which is put on the side, so there are two cameras on every student, and those two cameras are actually providing the front view as well as the side view to ensure that there is no additional person in the room or no additional material around you. We at FAST and the colleagues that I've talked to at the universities are so far not actually supporting this because of connectivity issues and because of certain other aspects which need to be taken care of. At this point, yes, we are thinking of remote assessments. We are considering, for example, some online exams, in shorter exams, not a full exam, but a shorter exam, a part of which is online, so that students are not that anxious that what if our connection drops, what will happen then? Not a 3-hour exam, but let's say half-hour exams, online part of it is done, and then you reconnect and there's another part which is given. We are considering things such as timed exams, that you're given 4 hours, you do your exam, and then you submit it online using the LMS, or if the LMS is not, you're having problems, email or even WhatsApp options should be there. You have the CAM scanners as well, if you can ask the students to do the handwritten exam and then they can CAM scan and send back the solutions as well. We are considering that option as well. We're also considering something which is Vivas followed up after an exam. I know that some universities within Pakistan, as well as some universities in the US, where some individuals I know they are studying and teaching, they're also carrying this out, that if you give an exam and then it's followed up by a Viva of not everybody, perhaps even a random Viva, that also helps students think more carefully about exactly what they're doing, because you have to understand that sometimes an individual can be tempted to use some resources if there's a take-home exam. So some kind of a follow-up Viva can also help. I think if connectivity issues are resolved, which cannot be resolved within the next few months, but if connectivity issues are resolved, we can have a lot of online assessments. Right now, we're talking about a situation in which there are no remote centers. We're not talking about many people giving remote centers is altogether a different thing for online exams. That I'm absolutely comfortable with. But if we're talking about no remote centers, which we can't have under the current situation, we're not talking about online exams. And there are many issues because of which we are considering more offline assessments followed by Vivas, some other issues of some brief online exams. What I do know is that there is a meeting going on. Well, the meeting would have finished now. There's a HEC meeting today, which is more about assessments. It is a vice chancellor's meeting. Our rector is attending the meeting or attended the meeting this morning. I haven't had a chance to have a discussion with him after the meeting, what kind of discussion was had. But I think HEC would provide some guidance to the universities on this as well. We at FAST have had our own discussions as well. We always look forward to some guidance from HEC. Would not like it to be very prescriptive, that is exactly this is what you have to do. But I think the more people think and debate and talk about it, the more methods we can identify. So they're just some thoughts. I hope they help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think in the world of assessment, which is quite used and has been used for many centuries, of course, one has to be very careful about it. So, Reza, if I may come back to you, picking up your ideas in terms of you did mention about the rigor, the security of the examination. So, in terms of the case studies, because have we do we know that there have been the cases where the professional associations they have used not only the accountancy sector but healthcare and any other professional certifications that may have used remotely invigilated exams online?
Yeah, thanks, Almas. So in terms of others who've been using it, and the number of MBA programs in the US and also in the UK who've used remote proctoring. But I think the important caveat in all of this is, in these cases, even the remote proctoring sometimes are done at specially designed centers to offset and mitigate some of the connectivity issues, which Dr. Sadia, you were referring to, because these can be real problems in some places where you might have the internet access, but then the speeds or the bandwidth that you have isn't sufficient enough for the level of video monitoring to take place to happen. So students may do the actual assessments in centers where you've got proper bandwidth, proper internet, proper broadband, and allows the students to sit those exams. So we've seen a number of MBA programs which have run remotely proctored exams. We found the remote proctored exams also have been carried out across a number of other institutions. So for example, there's a whole micro masters program which is run on edX, which are remotely proctored as well, which means you've got an invigilator set across you, but you've got to meet the minimum requirements from a systems perspective, from a bandwidth perspective, so that then the invigilation takes place effectively. Now, if you look at more recent times, so Imperial College, so just I think this month, and this is the world first. So the final year medical students at Imperial College are going to be assessed from home and with an open book exam, and the Imperial College is running the assessment in a way where it's almost like the patient's in front of you, and you are doing the assessment on the patient right in front of you, and the questions are going to be asked around the treatment and how you would respond to some of the patient's issues and so on and so forth, which actually then brings it into a much more real world context. So if you see how doctors are now dealing with their patients, it's all being done remotely through virtual videos and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what Imperial College have done, and that's just happened as well. And that's the first. In no other time have we had a completely remote-based invigilation of exams of students at a medical college. So that's changing as well. But I also do think increasingly there's an opportunity here. I think Dr. Sadia, you mentioned about time-bound assessments, so on and so forth. I think the assessments themselves, it will force us as educators to change the way we assess students. So it's not just about, well, can you tell us about Porter's 5 forces? It's not just about what you've memorized. So it may be more around application, because you can cheat with books open in front of you, etc. if it's a rote exam. But if it's about application and asking students to apply their knowledge in a very specific context, it's very difficult to cheat within a timed constraint. Students have to think critically and think of, well, how does the knowledge I have apply to this particular context or scenario? Because there's not going to be an answer out there. It's not going to be in any textbook. And so it forces us to re-examine how we set assessments ourselves up as well to support this whole remote delivery. Now, I do know, and I've had the conversations before, and people have said, well, but there will always be 1% of people who will cheat somehow, in a remote proctored exam. Now, that is a reality in life. So whether if it's a face-to-face exam in the center or if it's remote proctored exams, there will always be 1% of society that will always be seeking to cheat to do something. But I think the overall point is, as long as we are clear about what our rigor and the robustness of the systems that we have in place, that will allow us to then say, well, we're not going to penalize the other 99% because of 1% miscreants who are going to be out there trying to cheat the system. But having said that, I must say the level of sophistication and technology around remote proctoring has also been quite significant. The enhancements have been great. I think if you look at remote proctoring where it was, say, 5 to 7 years ago, it was fairly basic, where someone sat there staring at the other student over the video and then just seeing that this is how the student is doing. But these days, there's a whole series of controls. You've got the biometric ID, which you need to flesh out now and then. They sometimes track your eye movements. Sometimes they make you type a control statement to see what your typing pattern behavior is like, because we do have unique typing patterns when, the way we type, the way we develop or type out certain characters, or the way we delete things and type things again. There is a signature to the way we type. And so there's a base amount of typing that's done, and then subsequently the AI then looks at, has the typing pattern changed, over the course of the exams. And so, there are all of these tools that are available that allows us to be a lot better in terms of saying, okay, is this student cheating or not? So it's human plus AI, artificial intelligence, that also supports the whole invigilation,
Right.
which gives us more rigor and more robustness.
Right. So thank you very much, and it's a good discussion going on and all that. And I think since the topic of the discussion is the future of education, right? And I strongly feel that as a mother of a 14-year-old, that I really want to challenge. And he does challenge the notion of learning, which takes place in a four wall in the classroom. And sometimes he asks that if there is a calculator, scientific calculator available, then why do I need to memorize all those formula, which is the one scientist has already made it available for us, and any machine which made the life easier for us to, is the whole purpose to take us to the next level, and then investing our time more in terms of critical problem solutions and adaptability and agility, as this time requires us very dearly. So in terms of the quality of the graduates, I would like Hasan to share that what do you see the core issues in the workforce when they graduate out. We did touch upon the employability skill set in the beginning. So what are your views in terms of those skills which can be further brushed up by especially taking the advantage of the online solution, which can make us more inclusive? Those who are out of the schools at the moment, they can be included in the workforce in Pakistan. So over to you, Hasan. It's a broad question.
Yeah. So absolutely. Look, I spoke to an employer recently, a company, and they said they kind of raised this concern. They said, look, the people that are going to be coming down the pike, they're getting their education almost as if they're getting it watching television, right? This particular company was a bit old school. They value the human touch. They value the human interaction. And so they're kind of, at least at this point, they're kind of set on, defaulting to what they're comfortable with. I think that's going to have to change because, the switch that's happened, the rate of change that's happened is so drastic that I think those who don't adapt will themselves become obsolete. From 3% to 100% is just so drastic, and that it happened overnight is just unprecedented. So it is the new normal that everyone will eventually have to adapt to. And so I think it does present a lot of new opportunities for students to learn from places where they never really thought of, right? So it doesn't really matter if you're sitting in Karachi and learning from a university in Karachi or from Harvard University in Massachusetts. It doesn't matter. You could be studying anywhere in the world from the comfort of your home. As long as you're able to develop a system, a method, good practices that to a great extent emulate the learning that happens in the classroom. It's a digital classroom. You're physically not there, but it's a digital classroom. So a lot of the knowledge transfer, I think, eventually will be will become successful. And yes, there will be deficiencies that we perhaps cannot substitute from social interaction, as well as we can, as well as we I guess learn those things from the physical interaction, the in-person interaction that we have with people. Ultimately we are social animals, so those things, I think, we'll have to find ways to kind of compensate for those things, to kind of maybe overcompensate for those things. But again, if you're going from a digital classroom to a digital workplace, then maybe to a certain extent you don't even need those skills anymore, right? And I hate to say this, but I've seen this in practice. And I used to live in the U.S., and over the last couple of decades, a significant number of my friends and family ended up transitioning to a telecommuting kind of relationship with their employer. And I've seen this in practice. Their own social skills gradually degenerate. They're not dressing up for work. They're not as disciplined as they were. That routine changes. But again, employers then over time smarten up and say, look, I'm going to judge my employee based on the outcome of their work, based on the objectives that I've given them. And if I can measure those objectives, similar to an examination that's taken by an academic institution, right? You're judging people based on what they've learned. And employers saying, look, I need you to produce this output, do so, and I will compensate you. And then a lot of the other stuff that perhaps we started to take for granted, when we had the traditional workplace, maybe even doesn't even apply anymore, right? I know people in my own social circle, particularly in the West, who live their lives primarily from home. They work from home, they shop at home. They only go out for entertainment for the most part, but otherwise they make a livelihood right from the comfort of their homes. I think that's something that was fairly far-fetched in the underdeveloped world. It was a transition that we saw in the developed world over the last couple of decades. But in the underdeveloped world, we didn't assume that, there's a lot of unskilled workers. There's a lot of, people who don't even use information technology to do their work. Those are the people that are going to face challenges. But like you said, Almas, I think it's also going to create a lot of opportunities as digital learning becomes more and more affordable. More people will be able to access it, provided the government also steps in and does their part to make sure that there's ample support, whether it's the IT infrastructure support or the accessibility and affordability for the masses to access that information or that learning. And once that happens, then obviously it does present a lot of new opportunities for everyone, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the great insight, Hasan. And I think this is the time where we can take the questions. My son has started looking at me now, so it's better to start the questions. So Wasim Sami Khan is asking us, what could be the most important aspects of digital learning and assessment that need to be focused to ensure the quality of education? So Dr. Sadia, you did touch upon some of those areas, but where you can, through this medium of communication, panel discussion we are having, so where you want the government organization and as a matter of fact, the coalition or the partnership can really help addressing those areas of, we do realize that everybody agrees the importance of the digital learning. So over to you.
Thank you, Almas. If I have to focus on a few points, okay, let's say I focus on 3 points, which are, in my opinion, extremely critical to ensure that the online learning, digital learning can go on very smoothly. The first thing, which we've all touched upon, but I would emphasize again, is not touched upon, we've all talked about it actually, is better connectivity, better accessibility for all. And I'm talking about across Pakistan here. Many times we keep thinking of just the main cities, but I want to talk here about, when I talk about connectivity and accessibility issues, I want to talk about from the remote areas in Gilgit-Baltistan to all the way towards Turbat and the Balochistan coast and everything. So we need to talk about connectivity across Pakistan, good connectivity, because it is extremely stressful for a student to be enrolled in a course when he or she cannot have accessibility, connectivity. The second thing is for good online learning, we have to change the student mindset, and the students have to accept that the onus of learning is on them. The self-learning, this is the way for the future. People have to, there is so much information available. As long, if you develop that hunger for learning and you can find your way through that material which is available. I have for the last 15 years now, I'm just trying to figure out how long. For the last 15 years, I have said that in my opinion, after you've had 12 years of education, you probably just need a little bit of guidance if you want to really learn something. The rest can all be done yourself, and you can have discussions to improve that knowledge base. But after 12 years learning, a lot of it should be about self-learning. The third thing which we need to do to improve online learning, online assessment, is actually about improving what we are delivering. And for that, I think the faculty, people like me, my faculty, the faculty in other universities, we all need to embrace the new opportunities which this online learning is providing us. Because as I was talking about the opportunities, and I was touching upon how we can get resources from around the world and create better courses, better opportunities for our students. So the three things would be connectivity, changing the student mindset, and embracing the opportunities, particularly by the faculty, to create more and more opportunities for learning.
All right. So this is great. Thank you very much, Dr. Sadia, for this. And we have Rashid Khan, who's asking, how can we ensure inclusion and social mobility in a new digital age which education sector is now embarking upon post-COVID-19? So, Reza, you may like to respond to this question.
Okay. I'll start, Almas, and I'm sure Dr. Sadia and Hasan may also have their views as well. And I think the point around education, being a real driver of progress towards allowing for better social mobility, I think is undisputed. And I think with the whole digital age, Hasan, you made a great comment earlier on about essentially the democratization of education, because now more people are able to get online and get access to high quality courses which should have cost a fortune many years ago, where they did not have the same level of access. So we've seen that opening up of that access to education much better now than ever before. And I think that is absolutely what is going to be crucial for there to be greater inclusion in the access that is going to be made available to individuals. I think the point about income inequality or inclusion or social mobility, I think these are the biggest challenges facing our world today. I think we see the income inequality, for example, growing at ever growing rates. It is a big gap. It is getting bigger. But I do think with this online learning, with what we are seeing with the education organizations and institutions coming together and sharing content and making education a lot more affordable, we are, and over time, going to see students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds being able to then get onto that ladder, get that education, get that qualifications and certifications that are required to help them succeed in life. But it does mean that we do also need to stem the underlying problems that do still exist with online education. So we spoke about this earlier. We spoke about lack of broadband or internet connectivity, and this is the problem. This is not a problem just for emerging economies or more established economies. It is a problem across the board. So how so the rural economies in the US have got real problems in getting access to high quality broadband. So how do we make sure these individuals don't get left behind? And whether it's in Pakistan or in India or in Bangladesh or Bhutan or Sri Lanka or Singapore or UK, the same problems exist. So you have a middle class community which has access to good broadband, but then individuals lower down, they do struggle. So how do we ensure that internet connectivity and broadband is given the same importance as, say, electricity or water? Because I think in this world that we live in, it is going to be crucial. And I think if we can fix the public infrastructure piece and therefore the access to the education, you will see the levels of social inclusion and equality coming through. And ultimately, I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, education is the most powerful weapon with which we can change the world. And truly, the more access we can give to education, not just through the content, but through the underlying infrastructure that supports the delivery of the content, I think the better we can all do together in terms of supporting social mobility and really reducing the income inequality that we see around the world today. So I hope that helps you, Rashid, in terms of the question that you had.
Yeah, that's the great response. And yeah, Dr. Sadia. Yeah.
I wanted to add to, something to that. I think what Reza said is absolutely right. And I've also talked about how it creates opportunities for all. So I want to just touch on some additional points which are more towards the negative side as well. I have already said that to me, if we are giving access to all this material to a large number of individuals, it creates opportunities. But this inclusion and social mobility, what I am discussing at different levels is also about maybe some of us don't realize immediately that I'm so used to working on my own laptop, and my daughter would have her own laptop. There are people who are sharing, who don't have any desktops or laptops at home. There are some individuals who did not have a single laptop or desktop at home. There are some who are sharing it in a family of 6 people. So I can't attend the lecture now because my father had a meeting. So you have to understand that a part of it is also about the laptop, desktop, what is available. Also, Masa said that when I was putting on my headphone, that I am sitting in my office, which is now in the basement, and nobody would come here, and I'm absolutely fine working here for as many hours as I want to. I do know that there are people who are students who are living in a 2-bedroom flat where there are 6 people. So if I have a lecture and somebody else has a lecture and a third person has a lecture, it's the laptop desktop issue, and it's also the place to sit and learn. When they come to the classroom, everybody has the same environment. If they're sitting in an air-conditioned classroom, everybody's sitting in an air-conditioned classroom. If they're not sitting in an air-conditioned classroom, then nobody's sitting in the air-conditioned classroom. And I'm saying that because there are electricity problems, there are a lot of issues about the space in which the student is learning. So we need to be careful about these electricity, the room where the student is taking the course, online course learning, doing online learning, and the mobile phone, who has what kind of a mobile phone or a laptop which is available, and can they do their assignments because they don't have enough access to the laptop, desktop. What I very strongly believe is that, yes, anyone who has the hunger for learning, anybody who has a desire to learning, opportunities overall are improving for them. If we take it a few centuries back, and when there were only a few elitist sort of universities available, books were printed, so getting access to a book was also something which was a big challenge. Who can have access to what kind of a book? So the online material became available, which was opening opportunities for a lot of people, and now online learning, more and more lectures, short modules are available. It is improving the opportunities, but there are still issues, some of which I have highlighted, which we need to consider. There's a long way before there's a level playing field.
Yeah, that's the great set of comments, Dr. Sadia. And then can I move to Hasan if you want to add on to this area?
No, I have nothing more to add on this area.
All right. Okay, that's great. So we have one question from Rashid Khan, who is asking, perhaps this may be a repetition, but let's take it. What impact this disruption will have on the availability of the talent in the job market? So, Hasan, you would
Yeah,
like to?
I'd be happy to take that.
Yeah.
Look, I think it might be too soon to say, because most of us are still trying to digest the effects of this pandemic. It's something that is unprecedented, and nobody alive and at least in consciousness has experienced this over the last 100 plus years. And I don't even compare this to the Spanish flu, because the context is very different, right? We live in a much more globalized environment now than ever before. And so I think at the very least, it'll create a lot greater mobility, because as people become more accustomed to learning online, and then eventually employers becoming more accustomed to having employees online, you can pretty much, in theory at least, as long as the technology supports it, work anywhere in the world. You have some talent, some services to offer. It doesn't matter where you're located anymore, right? You could be 50 feet away from your employer in a private location, or 5,000 miles away. So I think it's going to create a lot more opportunities globally, but it remains to be seen, when things will settle down, because I think there's going to be a lot of anxiety, a lot of retraining that's required, a lot of rationalization perhaps with various employers in the near to medium term. Long term, I think there's certainly a lot of optimism in terms of what this holds, what this new normal holds for generations to come.
Right, that's great. Thank you very much, Hasan. I think that's a very interesting question I have from Muhammad Nadeem Ahmed. He may be the student of ACCA, but let me ask this question. Some countries considering to pass student on the previous passing record to ensure that their time does not lapse. And like Pakistan, even in London, Oxford University, does ACCA or ACCA thinking on this ground or not, especially for ACCA finalists who have one paper left for it? So Reza, can I ask this question, you to please respond?
Okay, great question. Great question. If I got a pound for every time that question is asked by students, then I'll be a very rich man. So the short answer is a no. So we will not be looking at just passing students based on their previous past records. Now, this is not a decision that we've come to lightly. It is something that for us, as a fundamental base, so we've got about 500,000 students. We've got about 220,000 members. So these are individuals who've completed all the exams. They have gone through their 3 years work experience. They've met the ethics requirements, and then they get onto membership. Now, every single member would have had to go through the final set of exams at the strategic profession level, and that's without a doubt. That's without exception for any members anywhere. So everyone would have gone through the exams route, which means if we started creating a process whereby individuals were allowed in to membership without passing the full set of exams, then we create a distortion in the marketplace. Right now, when employers see an ACCA member and they look at the CV and they say ACCA member, they have the confidence and the comfort that this individual has gone through a series of really rigorous, really robust exams and have gone through the whole process to get onto membership. If you then start relaxing the rules and the process around this in some places, employers are going to say, well, we've got 2 members, but this member has done all the exams and this member has only done 90% of the exams and hasn't completed the full exams, but they just got through. Then it creates a distortion in the marketplace. It impacts the credibility of what it means to be an ACCA member through the qualification. So we will not be looking at the previous passing record. We do know that students are saying, well, we've had one exam session cancelled in June. We don't want to see a progression impacted. Absolutely, which is why we hope, as I've said before, to have exams running in September in Pakistan. But also, even if physical exams are not going to take place, we will have the backup option of remote proctored exams as well that will support you in the progression. So hopefully, your progression does not get supported. And if you're studying for a final exam, all the best with your final exams. And inshallah, we hope that you get through the exams from the September exam sitting.
Right. Thank you, Reza. There are some questions related to the ACCA's remotely invigilated exams. So perhaps this is not the session for these questions, because we are arranging these sessions in the future for you, where the ACCA students would be informed about all nitty-gritty details about the remote proctoring exams. So please don't worry about it.
And sorry, Almat, if I may just say, if you go to the ACCA website, there's the coronavirus hub that we've got. If you go to the student section, there are more details and FAQs on the remote proctored exams as well. So that, again, could be a great source of resource for you to answer a lot of the questions that you will have around what is remote proctored exams, how does it work, what does it look like, when is it coming out. So it is, again, available on the website. And, we could perhaps send a link on through Facebook to the hub page on our global page as well, Almas.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be requesting our digital specialist of ACCA Pakistan, who will be putting up the link of this COVID-19 hub, where you have the complete information in the form of FAQs available as well. So there is one question, Dr. Sadia, for you from Rashid. So this Rashid is famous in asking many questions here on our live session. He's asking, how will this disruption impact collaboration among academia and researchers separated by national boundaries, and how HEC intends to respond? It's a good question.
Rashid, thank you for that question. If you're asking about how research groups which are formed and research activities which are carried out across boundaries, possibly because we're becoming more comfortable with remote connections, it could increase. But if I talk of my own experience, over the last 15, 20 years, I've carried out many research projects which are across international boundaries. So I've worked on a project in which there were researchers involved from 62 countries, another one in which we were researchers involved from 27 different countries. We usually would have meetings, email exchanges. If there's a conference on which many of us are attending, for example, there's an Academy of Management conference on which many people attend, so there'd always be a research group meeting which is there. So the reason I was a bit reluctant to say how it would have an impact is because for research, I think research has been going on between people of different universities in the same country as well as people across countries. I think over the last 2 decades, that has been there. In fact, sometimes people joke that I do more research with people around the world than I do with people of my own university, that's my own campus. So was that your question, or did I misunderstand? Was there a misunderstanding on my part? In that case, please do clarify if I have misunderstood your question.
Yeah, I think he's more talking about in terms of the collaboration between the universities, academia world, and I think beyond the national boundaries. And I'm sure he can, Rashid, if you can come. If you can share further details and bring in more specifics about your question. So let's see if he can come up with that too.
So I can elaborate on this, that there's a
Sure.
research side, the research side, which I've explained that research collaborations have been there, to my knowledge, myself, other people as well. And then there is the teaching side. And as I said in the earlier parts of our discussions, that I think for the teaching part, there are more and more opportunities which are opening up, because all of us around the world have become so much more comfortable with online delivery of lectures. Although, again, I would say we would need to improve this further as well. But if I see the kind of discussions we were having now nearly 2 months ago, or almost 6 weeks ago, and the kind of discussions we are having now, I think cross-university teaching, cross-university guest speaker lectures, courses. I'm even playing around with ideas on how I can create a course, for example, on cross-cultural human resource management, in which there's a blend of students from different universities there, which are coming together for online learning, and universities across the world coming together for online learning. So for teaching, I think it has opened up more opportunities. For research, it may have, I'm sure it has improved the opportunities, but in my experience, the research networks were there prior to this as well.
All right. Yeah. So I think you have already responded in that sense, because Rashid has mentioned that like HEC was sending scholars abroad for a master's or perhaps for PhD level education to be obtained, right? So yeah. Dr. Sadia, you want to add on?
I can add to that.
Yeah,
in
sure.
my opinion, no matter how much of online hybrid programs we offer and people are learning, taking a course of Harvard in Pakistan or whatever university, there is no direct substitute for going somewhere and experiencing that whole environment. To me, it is not just about the classroom lectures, it is a whole environment. So I would not recommend that we cut down on the programs which are there to send individuals abroad. I think online interactions are great, but the whole exposure that you get by visiting a different country, interacting with people of different cultures, not just in a remote environment, but in everyday, observing the way of living, the way of interacting of different societies, I think it helps us grow. Well, and I love to travel, and I love exposure to different cultures, and I think it helps individuals grow. So I would not suggest that we should substitute sending people over for master's, PhD programs, or just online programs. At least that's my point of view on this.
Right. So thank you, Dr. Sadia. And we have one question from Amir Salim, who's asking where he believes that it's established that online learning would be a strong alternative option available for the students in addition to face-to-face mode. So in the long run, even post COVID-19, what advice would you give to students on choosing the better mode of education with respect to learning outcomes in addition to the core behaviors? So I think any of the panelists may take this question.
Okay, I may just kick this off,
Sure.
almost, if that's okay. So I think the point is, it's a good question. It's an interesting question in that, it's not a binary choice. It's not a case of face-to-face is better or worse than online learning. I think they both have the pros and cons. And also, I think Dr. Sadia, you mentioned sometimes, the whole element of education isn't just about just doing it online, but the exposure to the cultural exchanges, the dialogues, that face to face, the camaraderie you build in campus, etc., and that all comes along. And face to face, is a great enabler of that. And sometimes online, whilst we look at building communities online, etc., it may not translate in the same way. So I don't think it's necessarily a binary choice. And there are personal preferences in terms of learner behavior, learner styles, and so on and so forth. So, and again, I think we do need to take into account. I don't think there'll be one answer to say face to face is better than online, or vice versa. But having said that, we also know that there is research, and I think there's a great research by edX. I think they were looking at the University of Columbia, where they looked at British Columbia, rather, where they were looking at the efficacy or the effectiveness of pure online versus pure face-to-face versus blended. And they found that blended as a solution works a lot better as well, because it is a combination of both worlds. And we think also, I think moving into the future, we suspect blended learning is going to become more and more of an option which people are going to be using. So rather than just strictly face-to-face or just strictly online, I think it's that combination which allows for the best of both worlds. So allows for students to learn at their own time, but also to use the classroom to have the engagement with their fellow peers, with their tutors, with their lecturers, and also be able to have a much more holistic development. So I suspect blended will become much more of a norm going into the future. But to the question of is face-to-face better than online or not, I don't think there will necessarily ever be one answer. But I do think it is going to be about what works best for different individuals.
Right. Thank you, Reza. Hasan or Dr. Sadia, if you want to share any other points, because we are coming near to the conclusion of our today's panel discussion. So any words of wisdom or any addition you want to make?
Hasan, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, please.
Just adding a little bit to what Reza was saying about what is better, this point. For this point, I would say the way I started it was when you asked me the very first question. To me, education is not just about the classroom learning or what you learn to get a degree. It is a lot about your nurturing you as an individual, making you grow as an individual. It's about meeting friends, the social aspects. It is about the extracurricular activities on campus. So if I have to give a vote, I would vote more in the direction of face-to-face learning, campus life, as opposed to just online learning. But of course, blended has its own advantages. And blended actually means we are still considering that we will retain some of the online elements of the courses, even inshallah, once we are off this post-COVID-19 part. Final message, I'll again repeat the 3 messages I gave earlier about if we want to improve this, the connectivity issue, the student mindset, change of student mindset, and faculty embracing this as opportunities as opposed to something which can create negative effects. So my 3 messages remain clear, which I've said before as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sadia.
Just a couple
Yes.
things I'd like to just add. So I agree with my co-panelists. I think perhaps a blended approach would be best, in my opinion, as well. I think I agree with Dr. Sadia that there's certainly probably no real substitute for the experiential learning that we get from interacting with people. From experiencing things, it's almost like, you can't say that if you wanted to go visit some beautiful place, you can now do that just by watching a video online. So it gives you a sense of, what that reality is, but not the entire experience. So I think a hybrid model in the future would probably make the most sense. I think it's also important that we all keep open minds as things are evolving so rapidly, and we just need to be very adaptable to change. Change we may not like, we may not enjoy initially, but the new world order is it's on the horizon. We don't know what it is. We don't know what challenges it's going to bring about. Some are obvious, but I think a lot more will become clearer to us in the coming months. And so keeping an open mind and being adaptable to that change is going to be key to success. We can we can we can take this as a negative thing, the calamity, the pandemic, but we can also turn this around into opportunity and use it to our advantage. And I think for that, adaptability is key. So I think just keeping an open mind and learning from those around us would help us all in the future.
Right, that's a great message, Hasan. So, any words of wisdom, Reza, from your end, and then I would conclude the session. Over to you.
No, I think between Dr. Sadia and Hasan, I think we've got fantastic words of wisdom, and I completely agree. Hasan, I think the point about the resilience and the adaptability and learning from people around us, particularly through these times, and Dr. Sadia mentioned about the collaboration that's required with other organizations. I think if these are the central themes that have come through all of the pandemic, I think the more we continue along these lines, I think the better prepared we will be for what the new normal then looks like in the future. So, and I just wanted to say a big thank you on behalf of ACCA to yourself, Dr. Sadia and Hasan, and a fantastic congratulations to the ACCA Pakistan team for what I think has been a great start to this series of the Future of Education conferences. So well done team.
Right. So thank you very much to all the panelists, Dr. Sadia, Reza, and Hasan, for your remarkable insight and sharing your experiences with the audience. And I'm sure those who have to see this pandemic, they will be also relating to it, because none of us was born in the World War I and II, but this is a kind of war. But at the same time, I think one of the key takeaways I can see throughout the discussion we have been talking about, and we really need to contemplate and think about it, that as Hasan said, that we really need to be adaptable, we really need to be agile in terms of having the open mind. And of course, the world is throwing to us in the form of pandemic. So of course, the change is only the constant element which will be there, and we need to adapt as per the change. At the same time, what Dr. Sadia also said, that yes, the future generation, existing generation, and the entire ecosystem can be encouraged to move forward in this direction of the online learning or the hybrid model, as Hasan said. But then, as Dr. Sadia said, that connectivity issue that needs to be looked into, where the coalition or the alliances support from the government end, and also you also mentioned the devices. So ensuring that the entire infrastructure to make it happen for the people, not only in the form of devices, but also having the affordability in terms of availability of the internet connectivity on bearable prices, and also the mindset which needs to be changed by the students and by the faculty member in embracing the technology and going ahead for learning online, and also improvising the online learning by leveraging what is available in the form of excellent content the world is out there. So with all that, I do sincerely hope, and I'm quite positive of the entire this epidemic and pandemic. I mean, as a mother of 14 years old, who is challenging me for the new norm to be more acceptable. And thank you very much once again for all the viewers for your time and all the panelists. So we'll be inshallah meeting the viewers tomorrow. So thank you very much. Take care and stay
Thank you,
safe.
everyone. And thanks,
All
everyone,
right.
for your great questions. Great questions.
you.
And thanks to the panelists as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.